Welcome everyone to our professional development series for Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness high school teachers in the state of Maryland. To our high school teachers watching this recording, we want to extend a special thank you for taking the time to learn with us. We recognize how demanding the job can be, so please know that your choice to participate honors us. Thank you. We at the Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management and Public Safety are excited to bring you educational experts from across the field to focus on strategies to best serve the state's economically disadvantaged students. Nitza Rivera is with us today. She has taught English as a second language to elementary, middle, and high school students, both in Puerto Rico and the United States. In addition to school-age students, she has taught county staff enrolled in her course, Spanish for Educators. Nitza has also facilitated professional development workshops and graduate courses for Washington County Public Schools, Hagerstown Community College, and Frostburg State University. She currently serves as a community school specialist in Washington County Public Schools and is uniquely prepared to discuss the importance of family and caregivers in student achievement. Nitza, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share these topics that are highly passionate and near and dear to my heart. Can I go ahead and share my screen?
I think you can.
Okay.
I can see your slide deck. I think we're ready to go. I believe you're muted. Nitza, I think you're muted. There we go.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see my screen? Do you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to talk about what it is to provide education for all. And just, I always say that it's when we keep everyone in mind because our students matter. Super easy, right? We call it easy as 1, 2, 3. And what we're going to share a little bit about, I call it the stats of our high school, South Hagerstown High School. And we're also going to talk about what it is, what does family engagement really look like, what it sounds like. And we're also going to have a little Q&A or a little conclusion to when we discuss all these things, we bring them back together.
Nitza, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're still looking at the Education for All cover screen or cover slide.
Let me see. Are you there?
Okay, we see easy as 1, 2, 3 now.
Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. My apologies with that. And we are going to talk a little bit about South. Do you still hear me?
I can hear you and I can see your slides.
Excellent. So South High, we currently have a total of enrollment of approximately 1,400 students. Of these students, according to the Maryland report card that was released earlier this year in March, we have, in 2022, we had 44% of these students identified as economically disadvantaged students, which would be a total of 622 out of those 1,400 students. I wanted to pull aside specifically Hispanic students. We had a total of 272 identified there. We currently have, out of these students, we have 114, and I had to specify that this is with ongoing enrollment. So in my role, I work with all staff, counselors, we work with administration, we identify these students, and what we do is that we outreach resources to be able to facilitate things that these students need. We talk about healthcare. We We talk about mental health. We talk about students that need help with, especially at the high school level, getting college and career ready. But we also talk about students that are looking into trades and going into the workforce right straight out of high school. So in my role, I facilitate a lot of the connections, a lot of the engagements. But we are seeing a highly rapid increase in our Hispanic population, our diverse population, but also our language learners. So family engagement, I prefer to use the term family engagement because nowadays we see that our family composition is very diverse, the same as the student population. When we look at engagement, that's usually the first word that we use to identify families' participation in their students' education. But I want to take it a step further. I want you to think about, not only do we engage, we want to engage families because we know that that's extremely important in the academic success of our students, but we also want to involve them. We also want to empower them. In the long run, our goal is for every adult in this student's life to be an active participant in their education. So I ask you, what does it look like? It looks like families sitting at the table when we are making decisions that affect all of our school population. It looks like a welcoming environment where families can reach out to teachers, they can have conversations with teachers. It looks like parents and families understanding what our grade book looks like, what is going on in the classroom. It also looks like a continuum of communication back and forth between the school and the families. It also looks nowadays like more engagement within the school, the family, and the community. And what does it sound like? I'll leave you with this. If it's important enough to say in English, it's also important enough to say in Spanish or in another language. And the reason I say this is because sometimes we get bombarded with all this information that we want to disseminate amongst our student population, amongst our families, amongst our community. But we forget that we have to take a pause and look at the diversity of all these stakeholders, all the ones that are involved, all the ones that have a direct impact to the decisions that are made in school or the communication that is shared or that isn't shared within our schools. And when we look and we think about students that are economically disadvantaged, we need to take a particular course of action when we are trying to address some of the unique challenges that these students face. And we want to make sure that we are helping and supporting these students overcome these barriers, remove these barriers, and then we go a little bit beyond the classroom, like I said, incorporating students' community. When we talk about involvement, sometimes we consider families to be engaged. They come to our activities, they show up if we call them for a parent-teacher conference. Usually they pick up the phone when we have a concern or when we want to share something that is positive, that is outstanding about the performance, about the students. We try to make sure that we are, again, communicating everything that needs to be communicated, correct? But when we talk about involvement, we need to take that engagement a step further. When I consider involvement, I ask our teachers, are your families communicating back and forth, or are they just receiving information? Are your families asking questions? If they see the grade book, Do they question, was there any element that impacted that grading within the student? Are the families giving input as to what they want to see happen within the school? Are the families addressing their needs in order for educational staff to have a better understanding of the individual challenges of those students? Are families coming in and requesting support because they know that, one, they feel welcome, two, they feel seen and heard, and three, that they know that the school has a clear, strong relationship built with the community in order for them to facilitate that access to resources? When we have families involved, all of these things are in place. Now, when we look at our high schoolers, high school is a little different. It's like a balancing act because we're trying to create this strong independence within these students that are going to go out into the real world. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we have an engaging family support system, because we know that that is directly associated with academic success. We know, research states it, we see it in our classroom, that when students have a strong support system at home, they tend to excel in the classroom. They tend to excel within their academics. Within the high school, again, it's a balancing act. Some students prefer to take it upon themselves to navigate the high school years. They prefer, they're in that stage where they prefer to attend things on their own. They want to be more embraced and connected with their peers. They want to be able to make decisions and their decisions respected, have their decisions respected. So when we look at involving families, we have to be very intentional and very mindful of what the family composure is. How do we best communicate with this family? And how do we best take in consideration what the student prefers in terms of independence, accountability, and so forth? When we look at involvement and retention, I always say we want the family involved, we want them engaged, but we want them to continue. We don't want them to lose momentum, that momentum that we experience when we have a transition night where we're inviting all incoming ninth graders to take a peek at the school, to meet with counselors, to have a brief meet and greet with, the sports directors and the different school clubs. We want that excitement to carry on throughout the 4 years of their high school experience. We have to take in consideration things like, for example, those families that come in and English is not their first language. There are cultural differences that we have to be mindful of, and that's why I say it's not only the practicality of family engagement, but also the intentionality of it. You have to be intentional when you consider the gamut of students that are in our classrooms right now. For example, if we have students that their families do not speak English, English is not their native language, we also have to consider what are the cultural beliefs of those families. And we have to take in consideration traditions, differences and similarities within their educational system. I love to share stories, and one of the stories that I'd like to share is a student that has been in our high school throughout her whole high school experience. Ninth grade, she's now a senior, and she's never experienced something that is a staple of a high school experience like homecoming. And this is independent of her economic status or her economic, if she is economically disadvantaged or not. This tends to more lean towards the cultural aspect. In her country of origin, homecoming is not something that is part of her educational experience, but it's a staple in ours. And we need to be mindful of how we explain that to families in order to get them on board, because again, it's something that they're just not accustomed to. So those are things that we have to take in consideration, and building that foundation early on that is super strong, that is super intentional in order to be able to keep that momentum going, despite the student being a junior, being a senior in their high school career. We want to make sure that all families are seen and heard. When we build that strong foundation early on, we'll have that parent that is receptive to when we call them with a not so good phone call, or when we have that parent that, is questioning what is something, what is going on with the student, that their grades are not reflecting, the potential of the student or the capacity within that content. So we need to be able to make that very, very strong foundation early on in order to continue and retain these parents and make sure that not only the parents, but the families are there. We need to, I say this over and over again, the importance of building relationships. When we create a supportive and caring relationship with students, we build trust, and that leads to better engagement, better achievement. Again, when we provide access to resources, including language access, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. If it's important to be said in English, it's important to be said in Spanish. And I used the example for Spanish because in our school, that is the second highest spoken language. We have students that have a gamut of others, speak French, speak Urdu, speak Vietnamese, but we know that right now, predominantly, we have Spanish speaking students.
Nitza, I have a quick question.
Sure.
If I was a high school teacher in Washington County and I needed to speak to the family of a student, and I suspected that English was the second language at home, who would I call for help with that?
So right now in Washington County, we would either refer them to or reach out to the Welcome Center. We have an international Welcome Center, and within that we have two of our staff there speak Spanish, and we have one of them that speaks French. In terms of resources, we have the language line that has a whole spectrum of languages that we use usually for brief phone calls home, usually to schedule an IEP meeting or to schedule a parent conference, or if we have, an immediate behavior concern, or we use it a lot in our health office when we have students that are ill and need to be picked up.
Gotcha. Okay, and I would imagine most county systems have something similar then.
Most what?
Most of the school systems in the state would probably have something similar.
Yes, most of them. We have, of course, it depends. Obviously, I always say further east, we have other resources. We have the diverse population is growing, and it's very much vivid and active within further east counties. So we have counties that we have an office, which is our International Welcome Center. Other counties have a whole department, and those departments are divided within specific staff members to address family engagement, specific staff members to address interpretation and translation. We have specific staff members to address enrollment. When I stated earlier on, we are in constant, we enroll 3 to 5 students on a weekly basis. And not all of our students' families have English as their native language.
Thank you.
Awesome. Very good question. Thank you. We obviously, like we mentioned, we recognize and we address the effects of poverty, and those effects are widespread. Like we know that they have effects on health. We know that they have effects on mental health. We know that they have effects on academic achievement. We know that poverty has effects on the brain and the functioning of the brain. We know that it has effects on behavior. So we know, we recognize, and we address these within the capacity. I stated off personalized instruction because at times it has evolved now, but there was a time where we had difficulties identifying students that had special needs, and also students that were not English speaking, and mainly because some of the students that lived in poverty didn't have access to healthcare in their countries or here for gamut of reasons, and it was very difficult to identify the two. When we look at some of our school systems, you mentioned how do we close that language gap. Some of our school systems, we are trying to find health professionals that will help us with screening, that will help us with assessments. So in order to be able to provide those individual educational plans, we need to have all these staff members in the know at the table making decisions, but we also we need to have them intentional again with the specific needs of those students that again are economically disadvantaged, but also are language learners, but also have special needs. So we have to have key staff there to be able to come with a holistic plan that addresses all of these individual needs within the student. And of course, empower students. I love the word empower because it just sounds bold. When we look at empowerment at the high school level, what I've experienced is that students have a voice. Their voices are a little stronger than a student that is in the elementary or middle school, but students have a voice and they are capable and they are almost ready to address their needs and point them out and say, hey, this is what I need. I've had the experiences with at the elementary level when students say, I just need a break. I just need a break. At the high school level, it's more complex. Like students have, the capability to say, hey, I am feeling a certain way, or I'm having this experience, or I've experienced this kind of trauma in my family or in my household or in, my early years. And as a result, this is why I'm performing the way I'm performing, why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving. So students have a voice. Difference is that they have it, they don't always know how to use it. As educators, especially because a lot of students, not all of them, but students that experience or live in poverty also experience trauma. And because of that, they have difficulties expressing themselves, or they just don't have the terminology to express what they're feeling, what they're going through, or what their specific needs are. So as educators, it's our job also to coach them through that. Listen to them or provide them a safe space, and obviously after you've built a relationship with them, but also listen to them and provide them a safe space, parting from the fact that they need to be seen and heard, but you also reiterate what you hear to make sure that what you're hearing or what you're interpreting that is coming out of them is accurate. And that is powerful. It gives that student meaning to their voice, not just like if they're having a bad day or if they just need a break, but giving them the vocabulary, the terminology, the tools to be able to express and address why are they acting or why are they having this kind of difficulties is powerful, because they're going to be with us for a short amount of time. We want to prepare these students to be active, productive citizens. We want them to have the tools necessary to be able to communicate effectively. And if we do that with them, that's empowerment right there, giving them those tools, being able to have them be their biggest supporter, their biggest advocate, their biggest cheerleader. And when I talk about providing support beyond the classroom, many of students that we work with that are economically disadvantaged, they face challenges outside of the school. And these challenges impact their academic performance. So that's where building those relationships with community resources and understanding what services are available within our community are so important. They're very important because we have to be able to, I always like to say, like, be kind of that hub, because we have these students with us for the majority of their day. So if we have a strong understanding of what's available within our community, it is, and again, it goes back to those relationships. We're able to say, hey, this student needs support with mental health. This student needs support with dental health. This student needs support with vision. All of these different things fall under the umbrella of health. They're very individual, and they all have an impact on that academic success or failure of that student or their performance throughout their high school year. So it's really important for us to have that clear understanding of what's available outside of the school, because that way we build a collaborative network to support that student further on. And I've talked about relationships. So I love to share stories, and I'll share with you two stories that have to do with this impact of having strong relationships. In my role as a community school specialist, I work or have direct contact with students, but not as frequent as if I were in the classroom. So at the high school level, when I began at this role, I lost touch with a lot of the students. I mean, it was a big gap from elementary to high school. So I lost touch with a lot of the students, and I reconnected with them when they came into the high school. And it was so interesting to see. But because I had always made it my personal goal to get to know my students very close and get to know their families and be able to be that advocate for them, it came to play, and it became very necessary when they came to the high school level. I had two students that I was interacting with. They were friends, and I was interacting with them because one of them I had when the student came in 5th grade. So we were talking, and it came about that the student that I had in 5th grade, I didn't know that she was into art, and she developed her talents along the way through middle school. But like, I knew she knew how to draw, but I didn't know that she was like artistically talented. And her friend was also into art and also loved drawing and also loved all this. But because we had this conversation and we had these strong relationships already established, I was able to provide a step further for them in order to be able to apply for our School of Arts. So had I not had these conversations with them, had I not had a genuine interest in to learn more about them aside from the academics, I would have never known. And that conversation took a step further when I shared with them how I coped with being homesick when I moved to the States and how they coped with being homesick through art. So a lot of their artistic expression was a way for them to cope. And we were able to have that conversation about, yeah, those are ways for you to deal with a lot of other emotions like stress, like anger. Um, Fast forward, these students apply to the art school and they will be going into the visual arts program for our next school year. I had another student who, again, had conversations with, and I didn't know that the student had received a letter um, inviting them to be inducted into the National Honor Society. Again, going back to the cultural aspect, they didn't know what it was because that wasn't a program that was present in their educational system within their home country. So being able to have the conversation, and they almost missed their inductee ceremony because, again, it was a process that was unfamiliar to them. But because we were having these conversations, um, again, aside from the academics, I was able to say, hey, isn't this student, and again, go back to the teacher and say, hey, isn't this student a part of um, the group of inductees this year? And she was like, he is. I just didn't know if he was following through with his application. So being able to connect the two just with the power of conversing and building those strong relationships had a huge impact, because now the student is graduating from high school, and as a senior, he can add to his academic portfolio that he is a member of the National Honor Society. And I hear that's a big deal. So now the student has, again, another pathway when he pursues his higher education, either college or community college or trade school, whatever he decides to go to. He's able to say, yeah, a recognition that I have is, even though I'm a language learner, even though I am economically disadvantaged, I'm still an honor student. I am still part of this National Honor Society. And all that comes from that conversation, building that connection, building those strong relationships. We, at our school, we had a speaker come in. His name is Josh. I always call him John, and it's Josh Ship. And if you haven't heard his story, read about him, or follow him, he was in foster care, and he talks a lot about, in his platform, about one caring adult. And he says that every student or every child is one caring adult away from success. And I wanted to share his story in a short video. If this comes up. Let me see if this comes up right here. Come back. So this, you will find all his information, and you will find his.
You're still saying your slide. It's all about relationships, Nitza.
Do you hear it?
We only see the slide. We don't see a video, and we don't.
You don't see the video? Okay, let me find this.
I'll pause the recording while we get this sorted out.
Okay.
I mastered the art of getting kicked out of foster homes. And the fact of the matter is I trusted no one. And looking back, I guess, how could I? From the time my parents left me, to the time another foster kid raped me, to the time I was bullied so bad, I tried to kill myself with a bottle of pills. So I'm sitting in the van, in the driveway of this next home, preparing to meet Rodney and Christine from Yukon, Oklahoma. He looks in my eyes and says, "Son, you can keep causing problems. You can keep trying to mess up. You can keep pushing us away. You can keep trying to get us to kick you out of here, but you've got to get it through your thick head, son. We don't see you as a problem. We see you as an opportunity." You see, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. March 2015, Harvard's National Scientific Council on the Developing Child released this study saying, and I quote, "Every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult." My friend and mentor, Reggie Joyner from Atlanta, taught me to think about it this way. In this jar are 936 marbles. Each one of these marbles represents a single week from the birth of a kid until that kid turns 18 years old. You know, a 16-year-old, you got 104 marbles remaining. Right here, we are looking at time. In fact, you're looking at all the time or all of the weeks you have left to influence this kid, or this kid before they turn 18 and begin making critical life decisions without your presence. What matters isn't how much time you have left with a particular kid that you care about. What matters is what you do with that time left. I mean, consider how many weeks Rodney had left when he bailed me out of jail. 26. I was 6 months away from graduating high school. 26 weeks to get through my thick head, my bitterness, my anger, my distrust of adults, to get me to finally accept help. You see, it's not about how much time you have left with that kid you're thinking of. What matters is what we do with that time. If every kid truly is one caring adult, one Rodney away from being a success story, then the challenge is this. The difference between a statistic and a success story is you.
That is powerful. The importance of relationships.
Nitza, I had a question. You're muted though. Looks like you're still muted, Nitza.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I know it's dangerous to assume that every kid that speaks Spanish has the same cultural background.
Mm-hmm.
So as a teacher, if I want to communicate with my students' family, and I know high school students are tough because they don't always want family involvement in whatever's going on in the classroom. How can what's my best strategy for figuring out a way to communicate with the family when my student really doesn't want that to happen?
Asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I have realized is that, and sometimes I joke about it and I say, well, not all of us who speak Spanish come from Mexico.
Mhm.
But every student has a significant story, and their story is very different. It's individual, is very different. I have realized that it's important to ask questions instead of making assumptions, because again, that student will be able to tell you who they live with, who is that adult that they honestly have a better relationship with. And I say adult because, again, a lot of our students here are unaccompanied minors, and they do not live with their immediate parents, their immediate family members. We have students here that live with uncles, aunts, family friends, neighbors in their home country, and now they're here and they take them in. And so I always say the best way is to ask the question, who are you most comfortable with me communicating with? I take it a step further. I ask them, can you share this message? Again, giving them that voice and empowering them to be able to communicate. When I say that, I give them like a little slogan, and I say, learn to advocate with respect. That is a lifelong skill. That is we all need a little bit of that, right? I always ask because I don't want to be that person that they trust, and I add another level of stress and strife in their life. When they're able to say, it's always trial and error as well. Not every situation is the same or works out in the best interest or in the best way. But I want to make sure that once I have that adult identified, that I try and see, okay, let's see, again, I give them options and choices. Okay, do you want me to communicate? Do you want me to send a text message? Do you want me to send a phone call? Because those two means of communications also help in again, instead of we want to bridge that gap within the communication and the involvement within the parent and the school system, and then we want them to feel welcome. And I also want to make sure, that the student, again, if the student trusts me, that I don't mess that up. I want to make sure that the student feels heard, seen, and comfortable with, being held accountable, but also being held accountable in a way that is a learning experience and not a punishment. Like, we want students to be held accountable and to, face the consequences of their choices. But we also do not want to add, because we know that students that live in poverty have a significant amount of trauma they're experiencing. We don't want to add to that. That's a long way to answer your question.
No, that was the honest way to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
It brought me back to an experience I had in the classroom. I worked really hard to finally make a connection with a student's biological mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while to get a hold of her because of shift work in the service industry.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, her involvement was part of the problem with the student's achievement. And I never asked, who is the adult that I should talk to help you with this problem? So I battled to find the adult that he lived with, but not the adult that could help him.
Mm-hmm.
So what you were saying makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
And again, at the high school level, it's a little more prone to having this kind of dialogue, this kind of conversation. But the thing is that we have students that do not have a healthy relationship with their parents for whatever reasons. We have students that have never had a relationship with their parents, and that is across the board. Like, that is not just our English learners or our newcomers or our students that are just new to the country or new to our school. That's across the board. So I think that again, that adds a level of confidence to the student to be able to say, like, there is this caring adult that wants to help me, but I'm also an active participant in my own education, in my own, in the decisions that are pertinent to me. I think that that's important. Like I always say, just because in my experience and with EL, I would say just because they don't speak English, that doesn't mean that they don't understand. So I always had, that was a little pet peeve. I'm like, can we talk about this outside here, because they understand body language and gestures and things like that. So that's across the board with everything. So I always say, like, just because they don't speak English, that doesn't mean they don't understand.
Good
So
point.
as a segue to that, I wanted to share with you, I shared with you two stories, but can you see this slide?
You're not sharing right now.
Okay, let me check out.
Okay, I can see your slide, but I can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you see the slide?
and I can see the slide.
Excellent. So I shared with you my honor students, and I shared with you my arts students, but my artistic and talented students. But I wanted to share with you one, this book, if you have an opportunity to read it, it's a memoir. It was part of 2022's like top 10 memoirs, according to, I think it was, I'm not sure it was Barnes and Noble or Audible, one of the two. And years ago, I read Enrique's Journey, and that was a very powerful read for anyone within, Title I schools, highly diverse schools, anything. That was a very, very powerful read. But Solito, a memoir, is like bringing it to the current state, to the current age. And I still, honestly, I still haven't finished it. I read it very in bits and pieces because I live it every day. So this story is very familiar to stories that I've heard. But I wanted to talk to you about another level of students that are economically disadvantaged, also English learners, but we have the students that are what we call SLIFE, and it's the students with limited or interrupted formal education. And we are seeing countless amount of students coming into the high school that have interrupted schooling. And we kind of function in autopilot. Oh, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to enroll them, and this is where they're going, and we're going to find these classes, and here's their Chromebook, and here's their iPad, and we miss the gap. We miss the understanding that, like, my friend Graciela came to me, and she is 16 and I help with her enrollment, and I like to always, again, build that foundation. So I start asking questions and I start asking about her. Graciela finished a 6th grade in her home country of El Salvador and had very little experience with technology. And I go ahead and here's a Chromebook, go on to class. And it took us a minute to kind of sit back and evaluate, are we setting the student up for success? It took us a minute because, again, we kind of, because of the speed of education and how things shift and how things come about and the expectations that we have as educators, we kind of miss the little things. So yes, she was enrolled in her grade according to her age. Yes, we were providing all the communication in Spanish with her caregiver, yes, we had her enrolled in EL classes as a newcomer, but we missed the part of her not being technically literate, and how we're moving towards that digital. We're in that, like, headfirst in that digital age, but we forget that a lot of our families, not just our language learners, we still have a lot of families that do not have a computer at the home, that all their access to technology, email, is through their cell phones, through their smartphones. And there's also limited capacity to what smartphones can do, or the user understands of what they can do. So, we want to be always mindful about, when we want to have surveys with a QR code, or where we want to have students type up their essays, or at the high school level where we have seniors applying for scholarships and they have to type all this and fill out these applications and all of that. Again, we could be providing them in their home language. We could have provide the support with a counselor, but we also have to take in consideration where they are, where they're coming from, and what skills or lack of do they have coming into our school systems. So Solito, again, is a memoir, and it is the journey of this, I think he's 9 or 10-year-old, going to reunite with his mom. He is coming through El Salvador, and I think what the journey was supposed to be 2 weeks, I think it extends up to like 4 months. And again, I recommend it. I'm midway through, and again, not because I don't want to finish it, it's because I take it in bits and pieces because of how near and dear to me and how I'm right immersed into that. So yes, now with that, let's summarize. As educators, again, we can best serve our economically disadvantaged students by recognizing and addressing their uniqueness and the unique challenges they face. And when they are supported, they can absolutely, indeed, wholeheartedly achieve academic success as well as overcome some of these barriers.
Nitza, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Do you have any questions?
No, actually, I've been asking along the way because I'm that kind of guy that likes to interrupt a presenter.
That's okay.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your stories and your expertise. And I like the takeaway of making those connections. And I think I'm probably going to reference back to that idea that one caring adult, right?
Yes. Yes. It makes a huge difference. I mean, students are continuously engaging with many adults in their lives.
Mm-hmm. But
I know that they're not always connected to every single adult in their life. They don't see themselves in that adult. They can't relate. The experience are very different. And it takes that caring adult a level of self-awareness also to be able to reach that or find ways, because it is hit or miss here right now. It's like, let me try this and let me try this other way, or let me try, again, even with technology, let me try text, let me try all these apps, let me try a voice text, let me try a video, in ways, finding those creative ways, but not stopping at, inquiring, asking questions, and being able to find those ways to connect, because there will be a way to connect. And once you get it, you hold on to it and grasp onto it, because that is going to be influential in that life of that student.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.